We are determined to finalize the market structure by the end of September. Man, oh man, Hines is really dropping the bomb here. This is the foundation for buying Bitcoin here in the US. He also says they're completely open to buying Bitcoin as quickly as possible. The next Fed president will be a Bitcoiner. The largest, most relevant, and most powerful central bank in the world will be controlled by a pro-Bitcoiner, at least if Donald Trump has his way. He's nominating Scott Bessent here, or at least says he will nominate him as the new Fed president. This is an absolute bombshell and would be huge for Bitcoin's development. And now, for the first time, we have a timeline. That means we have a pro-Bitcoin president at the Fed here who could potentially change everything for the Bitcoin space. And now, that means we can definitely expect that the US will buy Bitcoin this year. And next year, at the latest, Donald Trump together with Scott Bessent might fire up the money printing press at the Fed more massively than we've seen in a long time, or maybe even ever in history. That means anyone who's currently in the bear camp could be seriously shaken up. Let's take a look at all of this. We also have a new strategic Bitcoin reserve from India, and a lot of other things happening right now. But first, smash that like button down below so the Bitcoin price shoots up to Valhalla. This weekend is the Bitcoin Valhalla party, and we need a ton of likes so we can celebrate the big Valhalla bang when Bitcoin breaks through to new highs. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button down below. That means you really need to understand what's going on here. There are a ton of things happening in the background, all pointing toward a high Bitcoin price. First, we've got Donald Trump shocking the markets with his tariff policies. Bitcoin worth $77,000 is affected by these tariffs. Bitcoin takes a hit. And what happens next here? The US bombs Iranian nuclear facilities, just under $100,000. That was basically the next shock here. And all this while the Trumps are filling their coin bags and the White House is developing a budget-neutral procurement plan. If you've managed to survive, it's time to thrive. That's what Stackrotler says here. That means we now even have a clear and comprehensive timeline, an effective and strategic accumulation plan, and we have the prevailing market structure here, along with all the, let's say, inherent volatilities and fluctuations within the market, which of course astute and smart people like the Trumps have skillfully taken full advantage of to consistently keep accumulating more and more Bitcoin. We know they've kept stacking all along. Of course, it also makes sense to unsettle the markets and fill your own pockets. And that's what I've said many times before. We're now moving from phase 1, the accumulation phase, into phase 2, the Valhalla explosion phase, where prices are really driven upwards. And we'll take a look at all of this in detail with Hines, right from the White House with the market structure, and now also with the accumulation plan that has now been announced. And this decision fits right in with that. Here we see the breaking news. President Trump is considering appointing Scott Bessent as the Bitcoin Federal Reserve chairman, or hiring him for that role. And having someone like that at the Federal Reserve, someone who is a pro-Bitcoin candidate, would be unprecedented. He would be the first pro-Bitcoin candidate at the Federal Reserve, the most powerful central bank in the world. And we know that Donald Trump wants to bring interest rates down, and we also know that Scott Bessent is basically Donald Trump's right-hand man in this. That means Scott Bessent and Donald Trump are really working hand in hand here, and Scott Bessent is no fool. Scott Bessent is probably one of the smartest people in the traditional finance business. Back in the day, he worked with George Soros and others shorting, the British pound and launching speculative attacks on currencies. Scott Bessent is the right man when it comes to building a currency reset with stablecoins, with Bitcoin, and of course with a Genius Act and a market structure bill. And the timing is just perfect, how everything is coming together here. That means, first you open up to Bitcoin. Donald Trump now has 60% of his portfolio. There's a video I made about this about a week ago or so. Forbes leaked it. Donald Trump has 60% of his portfolio in crypto. With all his real estate deals, he's not making any money anymore. And now, of course, he has the ultimate opportunity to really fill his pockets. And then, in the next step, you can set up the regulations in such a way that there's really no other way for the Bitcoin price but to shoot up, right? And even if we take a look at the news here, regardless of, well, we'll get into that a bit more in detail in a moment. We can see it here, the ECBs, the good ones, the Godinos signaling openness to more rate cuts. In other words, the central bank chiefs and so on, they're open to lowering interest rates even further. Then let's look at the UK here, Bank of England, Bailey. Rates are on a gradual downward path. So here, the interest rates are on a, gradual, downward path, so the rates keep going down. Then here we have, who do we have here? Powell. Trade deals may allow the Fed to consider rate cuts. Even Jerome Powell, who for a long time said no rate cuts, is now saying we can start lowering them. The captain who's always late, Mr. Dummkopf, at least according to Donald Trump. I'm not saying that I have to be careful. I'm currently in Germany. If I go around calling people Dummkopf here, I'll get thrown in jail, and then I won't be able to go back to El Salvador. They won't let me out. Although I think if you insult the USA, that's probably fine. Just don't insult any German left-wing politicians. Then you might get into trouble. I think in the USA, you could probably call Donald Trump a Dummkopf. I don't think anything would happen to you here in Germany for that. Let me know in the comments if you can confirm that. And then, of course, we have the whole Donald Trump story here. He's got his bags full, he has the incentive to pump the Bitcoin price up. And of course, he also has Scott Bessent here as his henchman at the Fed, which obviously gives him even more ability to massively influence the markets. And then we come to the next story here. Director of Digital Assets says the US is committed to passing crypto market structure legislation by September. So this is going to happen in September, and I've reported several times already that we have 3 different parts here. Actually, we have 4 different parts. The first part, as Hines said back then, was ending all the anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto legislation. That was Operation Choke Point 2.0, its abolition. The next part was the Genius Bill, which isn't fully passed yet, but it's as good as done. This is all about stablecoin regulation so that the US dollar can keep being pumped, the US dollar can keep being pushed now through stablecoins and new markets. Scott Bessent, the US Secretary of the Treasury, also said, "Hey folks, crypto isn't a threat to the US dollar. Crypto is actually a huge opportunity for the US dollar." That's a really, really huge realization and a really, really wild story that's unfolding here. That's why I talk about a currency reset. Earlier, I mentioned a currency reset because the US actually wants to use Bitcoin and stablecoins to maintain and further expand the US dollar's hegemony. So that brings us to phase 2. Phase 3 is coming up at the latest by September with the market structure, and phase 4. As soon as the market structure is finalized, Bitcoin purchases can be made in the US. These aren't my statements, but rather statements coming directly from the White House, directly from Hines, who has confirmed this several times and is now even releasing new statements, where we can hear some really, really exciting details from him, where he reveals some very interesting things. This is happening at the Bitcoin Coin Summit in the USA in Washington, D.C., where the entire Bitcoin political elite is currently hanging out. I know there are always people who shout boo, 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 the politicians who pretend to be pro-Bitcoin. We don't need all these politicians. Yeah, we really don't need them. Bitcoin works just fine without politicians. Politics needs Bitcoin, not the other way around. Bitcoin doesn't need politics. But still, these are the people who pump our bags, who drive up the price of Bitcoin. Let's take a closer look at what the executive director from Donald Trump's White House, a prominent figure in his administration, has to say about Bitcoin and the current significant developments in the cryptocurrency space.
Yeah, so if you look at the EO, it did mandate an accounting to take place in which Treasury has spearheaded that. They have received the numbers from the different agencies inside of government. There are a lot of different actors that held on to some Bitcoin in some fashion or other. Now the process begins in terms of, establishing the reserve, the actual infrastructure behind it, getting all.
So now this is really, really important. That means there was Bitcoin in the US, but it was all kind of scattered around. So now they've audited it a bit, organized it, brought it together, maybe even have a rough plan of how many Bitcoins there are, where they'll be held, the keys, all that stuff. So that's basically the first step. Now they basically have the structure in place to set up the strategic Bitcoin reserve. That's also what a lot of people are realizing. You can't just go and buy Bitcoin if you don't even know how much Bitcoin you already have in your holdings. Basically, you first have to do a portfolio analysis. That's what we've done here now. We've basically done the audit, and the next step is to prepare for the Bitcoin purchases. Tension.
Accomplished. There's nothing in the EO that mandates that report become public, but we could choose to make it public at some.
Very important. There is nothing that would force them to make it public, but they might make it public at some point. That's, of course, a major key factor that I often mention. That you really play with open cards here, make things public, and don't do any kind of secretive sticky business or anything like that. That kind of thing is often punished by the Bitcoin community.
And we are certainly keen on the idea of accumulation. We've stated publicly that Bitcoin is digital gold.
Hold on. So they're keen on the idea of accumulating Bitcoin, meaning they want to buy Bitcoin here. They're definitely in the game and want to push it forward. He also says they've emphasized several times that Bitcoin is digital gold, that it's on the same level as gold. Sure, Bitcoin isn't just on the same level as gold. Bitcoin is gold 2.0 here. Bitcoin is gold on steroids.
It's in the best interest of the United States to garner as much as we can possibly get. I've said that at every conference that I've spoken at in the last 2 days.
Exactly, they want to get as much Bitcoin as possible. There's no upper limit. The only limit here is, the 21 million Bitcoin, of course. So you can't accumulate more than 21 million Bitcoin unless you also buy up all the paper Bitcoin. Just kidding.
3 months. Now, obviously, this has to be done in budget neutral ways that don't cost the taxpayer a dime. The president was clear about that in the executive order. But I think we have some very creative minds, 2 of which are sitting up here with me. And I think we'll begin moving very quickly on that.
So he's saying, folks, get ready, put on your spacesuits, get your helmets on. The rocket is about to launch. Hines is telling you the straight from the White House. This isn't coming from some influencer or someone on Twitter or, some random shady person. This is the direct source right here. They're telling you straight to your face. And now you have to ask yourself, okay, hey, they're being so transparent, so open, they're not making any secret purchases. They're saying, hey, everything is ready. We're going to buy Bitcoin here. We're going to buy the market here. We're going to buy as much Bitcoin as we possibly can. Of course, everything has to be budget neutral. Everything has to be clean from a regulatory standpoint. But we're really going to go all out here. And Cynthia Lummis, who's sitting next to them and laughing, she's not exactly opposed to this either. She wants to buy 1 million Bitcoin and even more. So this isn't some small story that's happening here. And still, there are people who are just sleeping through all of this. Just take a look at this. I just got a voice message here. Let's just listen in for a moment to what someone sent me. It's just so spot on.
You know, Mark, I've been looking into all this stuff myself for quite a while now. But the fact that so many people still deny it, especially since they still don't get what really matters. I just don't get it, how programmed people are, that they just can't let go of this 4-year bullshit. Like, I don't know what's going on in their heads. I also don't get why they always put all their trust in centralization for security. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Most people are somehow stuck in a bratwurst coma, and I don't know what's wrong with them. If maybe some synapses in their brains are just wired wrong or something. Let me know in the comments below if you have any answers. Honestly, sometimes I just don't have any answers anymore either. They'll even say stuff like that right to your face. They say, hey, we're going to buy Bitcoin. We're buying 1 million Bitcoin. We're buying as much as we can. There's no limit to how high it can go. And people, I don't know, they're still here buying lottery tickets, scratching away at scratch cards nonstop, and who knows what else, thinking they're suddenly some kind of hedge fund manager or something. Honestly, it's absolutely crazy what's going on here. Yeah, there's only one thing to do. Sign up at 21 Bitcoins, buy Bitcoin, chill out, ride the price increase, lean back, enjoy the show, grab a coconut, watch, and use the code BitcoinHotel. If you buy Bitcoin here at 21 Bitcoin, you can even get a discount of up to 20%. Of course, none of this is investment advice. Do whatever you want with your money. Go ahead and buy scratch cards and lottery tickets by the kilo and pay the idiot tax. Because that's what the lottery is, it's basically the idiot tax. Or you can look at what the big players are doing, the BlackRocks, the US government, the White House, and so on, and position yourself accordingly. It's all your story. See you around. Peace out.